at least on air. I don't know if Gulix is still around.
I was muted because I'm eating.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Also,
An ad for
usually I have to get.
Logitech.
Oh man, speak of Snowball.
Okay, everyone who has said anything so far sounds fine.
Okay. So I presume that means we can start the show then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me get the game off the overlay real quick. Alrighty, one last check on audio. That's going on the correct device. Alright, Gulix, here's something for the top.
Mm-hmm.
Then you may count down when ready.
Okay, we can begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Even in the ruins, you can find fragments of silicon.
All right. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon, the Daylight Interviews. Joining me this week is Adam Riches of that's the game, not the studio. Robust Games.
Hello, how's it going?
It's going well. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, things are going well after launch. Doing a bit of a recovery, but yeah, overall very positive.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I mean, can't say that everyone's had that story recently.
No, definitely not. A lot of layoffs. Well, over the last couple of years, really, right? But I think it's definitely got very hard for everybody in the industry.
Well, it's not just layoffs. It's like on the indie circuit, it's just somebody's current project not doing well. We've had a fair amount of stories about that. You know, Game X comes out and just sinks like a stone, so to speak.
Yeah, it's sort of various different things all coming to a head at once. There's no like one issue. It's very competitive right now, definitely.
Yeah, we've certainly gone over that with various figures in the industry, but we can touch upon that a little later. Because first, I think proper introductions are in order. And in order to do that, we ask this question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
That's a big question. Yeah. I guess personal. It's just something that's always been there for me. I started playing them at a super early age, and always had this kind of dream of wouldn't it be great to make one day? And after a while of doing sort of general office type work, I got the opportunity to join an actual indie studio, and it all kind of kicked off from there. So I ended up working about 10 years at Chucklefish, which is an indie studio responsible for games like Starbound and Wargroove. But I also ended up doing some freelance work for Raw Fury on their Kingdom series. So I worked on Kingdom 2 Crowns. So yeah, I had a lot of experience before Locomotive in video games, and but never like working on my own thing. So that was always the dream professionally to be able to work on my own thing. But the driving factor really was I wanted to make a game with my brother because he kind of growing up in a similar vein to me, and we kind of talked about working on a project together. And it was really from working together on this game jam that ended up becoming Locomotive that it all kind of kicked off. And I left Chucklefish and we had this crazy dream of starting our own studio together.
I mean, it's not that crazy, at least not from our perspective, if only because what you describe matches up with so many other stories we hear on this program. Like, the details may differ a bit, but the grand desire is definitely kind of pretty much the same. Somebody wanted to make a game, usually something from their childhood, and they found the means to potentially do it.
Yeah, and that does line up. Like with this particular genre, that those were games that we really enjoyed playing growing up, like the old LucasArts classics. Your Monkey Islands, your Sam and Max's Day of the Tentacle, like all that kind of stuff. Definitely was an inspiration for what this ended up being.
Like, once again, I've actually featured quite a few adventure games in the program recently. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Surprising. Yeah. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the likes of Old Skies, Elf
Oh, yeah.
Flock, or My Father Lied.
Right. Yeah, the Watch It Eye games, right?
Yeah. We had Dave on the program last month.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, Dave's cool. Big fan of his games as well, definitely. I'm looking forward to Old Skies.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we talked with him recently, and that's in our archive if you wish to, watch it.
Yeah, definitely. I think you had Francisco on. He's about to release Rosewater, I think. I think you had him on. Well, yeah.
We did contact him to speak about Rosewater, in its completed form, but he's too busy with the launch.
No,
right?
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah. But like I said, we feature a lot of people on this program. I suppose for a contrast, we had a guy from Mesopotamia, Iraq, who was doing a Mesopotamian adventure game inspired by 90s 3D adventure games.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'll have to go back and check all that out because that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, and just last week, featured a very ambitious adventure game called Elflock. So it's, like I said, it's never a dull moment.
Definitely not.
But,
No.
Yeah, but anyway, putting that aside, was there a? Sorry, no. I wanted to focus on the game jam. That's right. What was the premise of that particular game jam, and how did that lead to Locomotive?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It all kind of happened in the middle of the lockdown, the pandemic back in sort of 2020. So in the UK, we have like the narrative games exhibition, sort of Adventure X, it's called, and so that's kind of where a lot of the point and click fans and community and developers kind of congregate every year. And due to the lockdown and the pandemic, they couldn't have a physical event. So Adventure X decided to do a game jam that year, and I'd already discussed wanting to work with my brother on something, so I sort of I just looked at him and said, "Oh, this would be a good opportunity to work on like a 2-week game jam, do a fun little project together." And he kind of jumped at the chance, and so like we took part in that game jam, which had the theme, quite the vague theme. It's just called like a good time or something. So we spent a while like just trying to figure out how to work with that theme, and part of it was just kind of playing it back in our heads and we started formulating like maybe it's this old eccentric woman lady who's like, I want you to have a good time kind of thing, and it kind of evolved from there into this Lady Unterwald character, and we imagined that she'd be this eccentric heiress and running this sort of 1930s steam train, and then it all kind of like came together fairly quickly from that just initial like, oh, we found the thing of this theme, and we yeah, like it all happened very quickly, and within 2 weeks I kind of looked up and it had kind of been done, like just me and my brother had done the writing and the art and the code, and we did have some help with our friend Paul who volunteered to do the music for it, and we eventually brought him back to work on the full game as well, and really like that will set the grounds for what ended up becoming sort of like Robust Games and Locomotive.
Indeed. And I suppose it's worth asking if that particular version of Locomotive managed to place high in the Game Jam.
So it wasn't, I don't believe it was like ranked, but I think it is like either number one or number two slot in there if you go to the Game Jam. So it had a very positive reception. It was the reception really that kind of convinced us that we could do something with this idea. So we released it on itch.io, so we had a lot of comments and reviews, kind of asking for more essentially. We ended up getting some press coverage, which was very unexpected for a free adventure game. So we got covered in PC Gamer, and they wrote a very glowing sort of article about it and how we sort of captured that spirit, and how, you know, if it was a commercial game, like they think it would be like in high demand. So like that was really surprising. But then we also had like publishers emailing us, asking us like, are you going to do anything with this? So like it was coming from like threefold basically. It felt like, oh, well, if we're going to take the opportunity to do something with this, it feels like, you know, the press are there, the publishers are there, and like the players are there. So it seemed kind of like a no-brainer to us.
It certainly makes sense why you struck while the iron was hot, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not sure how easy or difficult it is to answer this question because it's kind of a big one. But how did that Game Jam version of Locomotive evolve into this fully formed retail version?
Right. Yeah. Well, we originally pitched. What we originally pitched to publishers was the Game Jam, but like polished. You know, we were going to add like voice acting and maybe a little bit of extra content. But the publishers were essentially like, well, what if you increase the scope a little? You kind of did something a bit more ambitious on it, and this is kind of where the introduction of more playable characters and everything came from. So the difference between the Game Jam and the main game is the Game Jam's like maybe an hour of content, and you only play as Arthur Ackerman. But what we ended up doing with the main sort of commercial version is you play through Arthur's story, but then you also get to play sort of through the events as through the eyes of other characters. So sort of in the second act of the game, you play as the detective Herman Merman, and then in the third act of the game, you play as Diana Osterhagen, and then it all kind of culminates in the end, where you get to sort of take control of everybody and all the pieces kind of come together. So that's definitely like the biggest difference, and in terms of scope, it added a lot of additional work, because it's sort of telling a non-linear story at that point. Especially like Herman Merman's story takes place before everything you've just done through Arthur. So like you got a lot of time jumps. But it helps to refresh the environment because you're sort of on the train for so much of it. But then you sort of playing through these environments with like fresh eyes. It's a different time of day. You've got different character placements and things to do. So it really actually was a great idea because it allowed us to reuse a lot of assets while kind of building on what was there already.
Reminds me of Broken Sword.
Yes. I played the remastered version recently, although I haven't finished the remastered version, but I've been enjoying that. That's one of the ones I picked up recently.
The first one?
Yeah, the Broken Sword remaster that just came out not that long ago.
Oh. That one's been remastered a couple of times. Because I remember that there was a remastered version that came out for the Wii back when that was, at the height of its power.
Right. I think there was like a director's cut or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah. I don't think you can get that now. I think this sort of reforged version is like the only version that you can get. But yeah, it's all they've like upscaled everything to like 4K. It's quite good actually.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't played that one. At least not yet. But anyway, so uh, was it very difficult adding the new characters into the established framework of Locomotive?
So there was an element of difficulty, definitely, because sort of Homer Mum was a character that existed in the game jam. So we kind of had an idea of like what that character was already, and we could just build on him. But Diana was essentially a new character. Like I think there was a character in the game jam called Diana Osterhagen, but she didn't really have any story attachment or anything. She was just a character, and we really had to like rethink her character for the full version and be like, okay, well, who is she, and like where does her story lead, and what part does she have in this story? So yeah, it was a lot of getting back to the drawing board and trying to figure out how best to tell the story in that way. And also in the game jam, Herman Merman had a very different sort of story arc. In the game jam, he's kind of like Arch, like he's kind of villainous in a way. And we changed that because I think it's much more fun if he's just a bit inept. Especially if you're going to play as him, you don't. I think you kind of want to see through his eyes. So he's a bit more sympathetic in the full game.
It makes sense. Granted, such a thing is a tricky balancing act, since this is a serious premise and a fairly serious game. So, having a comic relief character, especially a playable one, can ruin the balance.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a serious sort of subject matter. Like we take it seriously, but it's a comedy game at the end of the day. So we do sort of do everything tongue in cheek. And the character, everything is kind of heightened. So like the characters are heightened, and the dialogue is heightened, and like with the animation as well, that's all heightened. Okay, but it's murder at the end of the day.
It's actually good to know because, there is a difference between having a serious game with some levity in it, to a comedy game that's the comically serious.
Yeah.
That's a lot of LucasArts stuff.
Yeah, definitely, and that's where we took a lot of that inspiration. Definitely, like those old Monkey Island games. I really like the second one. I think is probably my favorite. But I also really like the Day of the Tentacles series. And Sam Max's, they're pretty cool too. Sam Max Hit the Road.
Right. Like I said, you're pretty generally good to go with the LucasArts adventure game. There are some exceptions, but I have some controversial opinions there. Like, I don't like Full Throttle.
I haven't finished that one. That's one of the ones where I haven't got all the way through it, and I
I
don't know if
have.
that's just because it's a bit more actiony, and maybe they were trying to go more like 3D with some of it. I don't know if it's that, but I think that was a hard one for me to get to the end of.
Yeah, I mean that was part of it for me. Like them trying to do the basically road rash in an adventure game didn't click. Again, I know
Yeah,
it
it
takes
has.
combat in full throttle, but
Yeah, it does have that kind of like sequence where you're on the motorbikes and you're trying to fight off characters. It transitions suddenly to like 3D. It's a bit
yeah.
jarring when it first happened.
But aside from that, full throttle always just came across as too simple for me. Like they just cut the scum system down to the bone.
Right. Yeah, you have the three options, right?
Yeah. Um. Anyway, um, getting speaking of influences, I cannot let it pass given how much a train features in this game. But did you take any cues from The Last Express?
It's a game that I was told about multiple times, and then I had to Google it. What I think is really interesting about that, or from what I've been told, is that it's sort of on a timer, right? So like the time keeps
Yeah.
moving, and then characters are sort of moving about as the game progresses. Like that's something that I don't envy because I think it would have given me a huge headache. But if we were to ever do a sequel, I think that would be really fun to explore. Like having everything kind of progress, whether like you've solved the puzzles or not.
Right. Honestly, it's the thing that always put me off of The Last Express. Because, not coincidentally, my least favorite King's Quest game is 3.
Right. That has the same mechanic, right?
Yeah, or something close to it, where the whole thing is timed, and if you're not on the ball, especially King's Quest 3 is probably the most complicated King's Quest game because it has the magic system.
Okay, right, yeah. I think that series as a whole was quite unforgiving.
Well, yes, it was very intentionally unforgiving.
Yeah.
There are a lot of moments in King's Quest where it's just malicious game design.
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
point the bridge in King's Quest 2, just classic example.
I think I read it. I can't remember which game it was, but there was an item that if you just don't pick up early on in the game, you just can't finish the game.
Okay,
Maybe that's just one of them, actually.
that is many Sierra adventure games.
Yeah. I think that's kind of why I lean more LucasArts, because it's a bit more on your side. It doesn't actively hate the player.
Well, yeah. Ultimately, the LucasArts School of Game Design won out because, Sierra Games not only they liked putting you in unwinnable situations to sell you the hint books, and also killing you. Oh, so many deaths. Though,
Space Quest is the same, right? Yeah.
yeah. Though adventure game fans tended to like the deaths because they were so inventive, especially in like Space Quest.
Yes, definitely. Getting eaten by plants and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if a game that did that would be as successful today, because it's going back to like our first discussion about how everything's super competitive now. Like you're really competing for players' time, and I don't know if a modern player would like continue through it if they encounter something like that, or if they just put the game down and play something else. It's really, that's one of the biggest things that's changed since then.
Right, but we play adventure games on the regular, and I cannot tell you the last time an adventure game killed me. That wasn't from back in the day. Nobody liked that Sierra game design, which is why it didn't survive. adventure games don't kill you. They don't put you in unwinnable situations. They got rid of the old school game design.
Mm.
Indeed, your game here has some of the not necessarily modern accoutrements, because I do think you could have found them in some of the games, but waypoints, hints, an internal hint system,
Mm.
stuff to help the player. I know hint systems are controversial, but honestly, waypoints are a godsend because I'm also familiar with the pixel hunt.
Yeah, so that's definitely something we took into account when making this, is that we wanted to cater to like people that love these kind of games, but we also wanted to introduce them to people that might not have ever played an adventure game before. So we were quite broad with our reach, and that's partly why we added like native controller support. So like, because we knew we were going to launch on Nintendo Switch at the same time as PC, so we had to have the game bag controls on point. And that's something we definitely spent a lot of time on. So like, it is modernized in some respects, like in that if you plug a gamepad in, you have direct control. You don't have to point really or click. Uh, so like, we had to do some of that stuff just to make it a bit broader, and we do have the helpline that players can choose to call, and it's sort of like in world, so like they're calling the best detective in the world essentially, and he can give you hints, and then if you keep asking for them, he will eventually give you the solution. That's all stuff that we added. But if a player doesn't want to use the hint line, then they don't have to. I think even in Thimbleweed, right, Ron Gilbert, after release, I think they added the hint system.
Yeah, Thimbleweed Park used that. Strangeland used the hint.
Mm.
I'm not
I
sure if
think
you're.
so. The one I played most recently, well, not most recently because I played Broken Sword, but the one before was Return, and you just have a hint book in your inventory.
Yeah, some of them do it like that. Some, like I said, yeah, some get more creative than others.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that anything that can, widen reach and introduce more people to the genre is a good thing. But you're always going to have the purists, right?
Okay. And of course, since we're talking about adventure games, we always have to get into this part: puzzle. Like, what kind of puzzles are you doing in Locomotive?
So we have the sort of dialogue puzzles where, like, there are a few where, like, to solve something, you just have to like talk to a character and get the right, answer out of them. But it's mostly like item puzzles, item combination puzzles. It's very like LucasArts in that respect, where you pick up everything that's not nailed down and you can combine things together. You kind of have the old infinite inventory, right, where you're putting these huge objects in your shirt, trousers, or
Right.
whatever. Yeah, it's kind of definitely in that similar vein. So we have those, and because the game is told from the perspective of sort of a narrator, right? So like at the beginning of the game, everything's already taken place, and it's a character retelling the story, right, to these other characters. So we can be cheeky, not necessarily with deaths, but we can have puzzles that you can fail at, and then the character might go, "Oh well, that didn't happen, obviously," and then it kind of resets you back to that specific room or that moment, so you can retry again. But like that only happens a couple times. It's mostly the dialogue puzzles and the item combination puzzles. And we really try to not have any like quick time or like timed puzzles, because generally, I think you have to think about accessibility with that stuff. So
Yeah,
some players might not be able to like click that quickly.
yeah, yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of timing puzzles, but um, before I continue on my line of questioning, Galix, do you have anything to ask our guest before you have to depart?
No, I think I'm probably good. It looks interesting though.
All right. Just wanted to make sure. All right.
No, that's fair, and I do have to get going. Sorry.
Yes. It's fine. Like obligations await. Anyway. Was there any consideration towards logic puzzles?
In what regard?
Think like Myst.
Oh, right. We sort of environmental kind of type puzzles where, yeah.
Yep.
I'm trying to think if we have anything like that. I think we might have like one or two puzzles like that. It's probably towards the end of the game. So sort of at the end, towards sort of the end of the game, you do gain control of all three characters at once, and we have you sort of environmentally split up from another. So as part of the logic puzzle, you can actually send items to each other through this pipe network. So we use the environment in that way, and you're all essentially like swapping inventories through the environment in order to solve some puzzles. That's probably the closest thing we get to logic puzzles.
Yeah, I want to say Day of the Tentacle did that at some point.
So the way that they do it is because they sort of go through time in these chronotrons or whatever they're called. You can send items to each other through the chronotron.
Yeah, they called them the Chronojon.
Chronojon, yeah, because they're like toilets essentially.
Yes.
You sort of flush the items to each other.
Yes. Anyway, so what engine did you use to build Locomotive?
So we used Unity for this one, but we're also using. I don't know if you've spoken to Dave Lloyd of the Drifter. He works at Power Hoof, and he made this tool called Power Quest, which is a tool on top of Unity that's specifically built to make adventure games. And he's been using it for a while to make his own adventure game called The Drifter. It's kind of got a horror lean to it, but it's essentially like free to use. So we've been using it for the last few years, and we actually used it for the game jam. So that's like the two main things we use. I definitely recommend Power Quest if you're going to make one of these, because it definitely makes things easier.
I mean, you're a bit young to be using Adventure Game Studio.
You'd be surprised how many people are still using it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Dave's still using it.
Dave, yeah. I think Rosewater's still in AGS. Yeah, I think so. A lot of them are actually. I think Excavation of Hobbs Barrow. I think that's also, yeah. I think more often than not, it's still AGS.
Which is why I ask.
Yeah, anyway. I think because we knew we were going to do consoles, it just makes it so much easier to use Unity. Because I think with the porting stuff for AGS, it's a little more difficult.
Yeah, especially to like if you want to bring this to mobile devices, AGS and iOS and Android aren't getting along well these days.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely something we're considering. Like if we can bring it to mobile, I think that'd be fun. Touchscreen support was something we wanted to have at launch because the Switch supports it, and I'm pretty sure we can get it working on the Steam Deck as well. So that might be something we add in an upcoming feature patch. And then that would allow us to do mobile pretty easily as well.
Right. It sounds implementable, at the very least.
I hope so.
Anyway, I suppose another question to ask is this a genuine murder mystery?
Okay. In what way?
Okay, that is to say, you do you have to finger a suspect at the end and accuse them of the crime, or is it is this all narrative?
It's okay. Yeah, that's definitely a fair question. I think we made the decision to make it be linear and focus more on the narrative because we had discussions early on about it being non-linear and you being able to sort of decide who committed the crime. But then we had to look at our scope and how much time we had, and part of it was like, okay, let's just try and tell a really good version of this rather than try and write 5 versions of this where like maybe 3 of them might not be as good as the other 2. Like I think it was important for us to just try and focus all of our energies into telling one story rather than sort of having like multiple outcomes, if that makes sense.
No, I get what you're saying, because multiple outcomes increases the workload quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And also like I think
Or you have to go the other way, and
Mm.
you make things so simplistic that the endings don't really matter. Looking at you, Ripper.
Yeah, that's true. Like you want the ending to be satisfying no matter what ending you get, right? And I think it's just easier to do that with like a focused um telling of the narrative rather than trying to tell it in 5 separate ways. But yeah, we played with that idea for a while before deciding to tell it this way. And also like I think it's still replayable even though it's linear because the murder is kind of like the setting along with the train, but like I think where a lot of the meat and the charm of the game is just through like all these character interactions, and that's where we got a lot of our energies.
Right, I get what you're saying. Anyway, so when did Locomotive come out?
When did it release? So we released in November 21st, 2024. So it's been, a couple months, not too long now. But yeah, so how many? Okay, November 21st. 2 months, 3 months? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
It all goes so
and
quickly.
and it sounds like the game's been doing well in the market.
Yeah, we got some good critical reception, and players seem to like it. I think we were overwhelmingly positive on Steam. I think we might have just gone below the threshold, but I'll have to check on that. And yeah, like it seemed to go down really well. I think it ended up being a lot longer than we wanted. It was supposed to be like pretty short in terms of like gameplay, but I was most surprised by like how long it took some people to get through it. It's funny when you're building it, you kind of have these blinkers on, right? And you already know the solutions and everything, so you think, oh no, but it's only X long, and then somebody else plays it and they take like 3 times as long, and you're like, oh god. So I think maybe we could have some of the feedback we got is maybe it could have been a bit shorter and a bit more focused. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I'm still really proud of the game, and the reception was like better than we could have ever possibly imagined. Really,
I'm like, how do I put this? Like, it might be depending on, how meaty you want your adventure game experience, especially if you're looking towards, say, the old school, because adventure games back in, say, the 90s were full releases that were designed to take up, quite a bit of time.
yeah, I think that's where we ended up being, but I think we probably could have got away with it being, let's say, 5 hours rather than 10 to 15.
Anyway, so I see that your old publisher Chucklefish helped you with the publishing of this game.
Yeah, so we kind of pitched it around and we sort of put it through their pitching process. And I was lucky enough to get to, work with people that I'd worked alongside in a different capacity. So that was interesting. And yeah.
How it looks from the other side.
Yeah, it was interesting in a way because, I know everyone there and suddenly you kind of the relationship's very it changes slightly, right? But
I hope things didn't get awkward.
no, not in that respect. But your colleagues, and then you kind of become. It's almost like they're doing stuff for you, right? Rather than working with, they're kind of working to support you in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose it's worth asking, what are you doing in terms of like patches, upgrades, post-release support? Because, like you mentioned, the desire to add touchscreen support to the game. Are you working on anything else along those lines?
Yeah, so we put some patches out after release, mostly like bug patches and things to fix some bugs we needed to squash. And we got more of that coming as well. I guess the biggest thing we want to do is a quality of life patch, and something like touchscreen support would probably be in that update. I think one of the things we wanted to look at was changing like how autosave works, maybe just improving our saving system a little bit, and like when it saves and stuff like that. Because right now it saves every time you go into a room, and I realized that maybe it shouldn't do that. So we're gonna look at that and see if we can implement it in a different way. So that's more like a back end change rather than something that a player might benefit from. I guess one of the things that I wanted to add is like a sort of to-do list, just to keep players sort of aware of what needs to be done at any given time. I think some of the feedback we got was it would have been a nice to have, and I agree with them. So we're going to see if we can add that in as a feature sort of post-launch.
Okay. And have you made the decision to bring this game to the Xbox and the PlayStation?
I mean, if we can bring it to as many platforms as possible, in my eyes, I think that's only beneficial. So yeah, I would love to bring it to Xbox and PlayStation, and even like something like mobile would be fun to do. But we don't really have anything to announce at the moment. It's mostly just like discussions.
Fair enough. And I suppose my final question is, have you given any consideration towards your next project yet? Or has it just not been in the mind space yet?
Yeah, the recovery process has been a bit long, but I've definitely thought about what the next thing should be. Like, I haven't really fixated on any one idea, I guess is the problem. We're a two-man team, so I think if we were to come to a decision, it would be just from coming to an agreement on, okay, this is what we both want to work on, if that makes sense. But yeah, still a bit in the stage where we're focusing on Locomotive sort of post-launch support, and then we're going to look into what would be next down the line.
Okay, fair enough. All right then. So Petty, do you have any questions of your own to ask at this moment in time?
Not really. I think I'm good.
All right. So Adam, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today to talk about Locomotive and adventure games. It's been a wonderful conversation. And hopefully we can do it again whenever game number 2 gets into production and gets revealed and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. I just want to thank you guys for taking an interest and reaching out, and yeah, I'm really glad we got to have this conversation, because I think it's definitely fun to talk about all these different aspects, and especially about the genre in general. So just want to thank you guys.
Not a problem, not a problem. And once again, if you want to watch our other recent interviews with other about adventure games, our archive is on YouTube. It's still on Twitch, but considering Twitch just changed their policies, it's a whole mess.
Yeah, I
Right.
literally have to purge over 1,600 hours of content.
Anyway, putting that aside, the game is Locomotive. It is available on Steam and the Nintendo Switch. You can purchase it right now for it's on sale for $16.19, but regular price is $17.99. Plus the soundtrack is available for $4.99 regular price, and the discount price is for $49 USD. So be sure to pick that up today. And right, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be
Thank
sure
you.
to tune in next time when we do the Sunday reviews. No problem. Once again, it's good having you here. And until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.